Brian Noonan from Mike McConnell on 720 WGN. After all the time, Drew Peterson finally came in front of the judge yesterday and was sentenced. Oh, my goodness. 38 years in the big house. You heard Steve report that he is now on his way to Statesville, where he will start serving that time. Now, I don't know a lot about the law. I watch a lot of law on television, but I always turn to the woman who I have on speed dial and who I'm fortunate enough to spend a lot of time on Sunday nights with when she's in with me answering your legal questions. WGN's legal expert, Karen Conti, joins me now to make some sense of this. Hello, Karen. It seems like we haven't seen each other in ages.
Brian, I miss you.
I miss you as well. I'm looking forward to March when we are back together.
That's right. Who cares about those hockey players?
Listen, they can they hoss something. They can skate around all the time, but as long as they're not skating Sunday nights. But listen, we're happy to have them back, and we'll think of all the legal questions that people will have pending when we get back a week from Sunday.
Can't wait.
All right, now let's get to this. First of all, have you ever, in all your time in court, have you ever seen a defendant make such a long statement when the judge says, "Do you have anything to say to the court?" and then Drew pops up and goes on for over a half hour?
I have seen defendants talk for a long period of time, but usually it's a little bit more measured, a little bit more calculated, a little bit more controlled, because really if that's going to influence the judge at all. The judge wants to hear, "I'm remorseful for my crimes. I will never do this again. Please give me a light sentence because I will rehabilitate." And none of that Drew Peterson said was geared toward that. It was just him venting and him emoting and denying his culpability, which was completely ineffective. So It was unusual in that his lawyers couldn't even control him to say something that might help him rather than hurt him.
Is there a point where the judge sits down and he probably had a sentence in his mind already? Do those closing statements ever sway a judge one way or another, where they could say, "You know what, I was going to give you 38, but because of your elongated speech, now I'm going to give you 45, or I'm going to now give you 25"?
Yeah, I've asked judges that very question, and I would say that most judges will tell you that in 98% of the times they already have something in their mind. And occasionally someone will say something stupid or say something appropriate that will change them, but usually it's just a few years here or there. Like I said, the judges want to make sure you're not going to do it again, and if you are going to get out, you're going to have, you're not going to recommit, and that's the judges don't want to have bad publicity and bad press. So that's their thought process. And, I think the judges can be swayed. But really, would Drew Peterson have swayed anybody at this point? I don't think so. I think we all kind of have a feeling of who he is and what he is, and I don't think anything was going to change the judge's mind.
Yeah, I think it was, completely disingenuous, where you watched his pattern of behavior up until his arrest, and then even since the arrest, and now all of a sudden, when he's faced with the reality of doing the hard time, then he's going to change his tune and try to blame everybody else. But let me ask you this, from an attorney point of view. The state's attorney, James Glasgow, made some comments yesterday that I thought were a little outside the bounds of professionalism, when he made light of the pitch of Drew's voice being effeminate, and that he was going to stare him down. And it just seemed like, as the state's attorney, shouldn't you just be confident enough in the win to let that go rather than getting a little more personal?
Yeah, you should. But, let's face it, when you're in the public eye and you're doing this kind of high-profile case, people sometimes don't act completely appropriately. And no, I agree with you. I mean, he represents the people of the state of Illinois, and he shouldn't be getting down in the mud with someone like Drew Peterson, and should be above that kind of thing. But, we all have emotions, and a lot at stake, and, it was a good career move for him to win this. It would have been horrible if he had lost it. So I understand why the tension is high.
WGN legal analyst Karen Conti is with me. We're talking about, obviously, the Drew Peterson case. All right, the judge had a range. He could have gone 20 years all the way up to 60 years. He settled on 38. Why do you think that was the case, and how much time does Drew actually have to serve? Because he said, he's had 7 cousins die all before 60, so this was a death sentence for him.
Yeah, and because it's murder charge and a murder conviction, he will serve all of that time.
Okay.
So, there's truth in sentencing there. Yeah, interesting. You would think that he would have got on the high range just because it's Drew Peterson. But frankly, what the judge has to do is look at the range, kind of go in the middle, and then say, are there aggravating circumstances that make it worse, and are there mitigating circumstances that require him to have a shorter sentence? So if you look at the case, he doesn't have very many aggravating factors. It was only one murder as opposed to triple murder. Mm-hmm. The victim was not under 18 years old. It wasn't a murder for hire. There was no torture. And on the good side, he had a job his whole life. He took care of his children. He has children that he has custody of. If we look at those factors, he really should end up in the middle range, which is what the judge did. I think the judge probably deducted a few years for the years he already served, and it was a fair sentence.
All right, now, so you said he's got to serve all 38. We've all heard stories, and you've had experience with clients going to prison or being in prison. How does an ex-cop fare in prison? Will he have to be in isolation for all those 38 years? What do you think is going to happen now that he's going to Statesville?
They're talking about that, Brian, and I have something else to say about this. I think because he's such a high-profile defendant, that he's going to be treated pretty well in prison. He's charismatic. He's a sociopath. He's going to be doing just fine in there, and he's going to have some assets and some money to use in there to barter things and maybe barter some protection. And I think he's going to have female attention. He's going to have attention from the media. And I think...
Where will he get female attention, Karen?
Well, there's always some young girl who wants to date the bad guy.
Oh, so like correspondence, but he won't have access to women in prison, will he?
No, but they can come visit him. I mean, he's free to have anybody he wants come to visit him, and you can be sure that there will be prison romances going on. I think he had one while he was in the lockup at Will County. So, yeah, I think he's going to do okay. I think just because of the high-profile nature, I think he's probably smart enough to be a jailhouse lawyer for some of the people in there. So he's going to do okay.
All right, 312-981-7200 is the number. Karen Conti is my guest. Craig has a question, Karen, if you don't mind. Craig,
sure.
What's going on? What's your question for Karen?
Now, I'm not saying that Drew Peterson didn't do it, but isn't this hearsay law, isn't this kind of dangerous for us as a society at large? I mean, Joe Schmo could wind up dead, and Susie over here could say, well, Joe Schmo told me that so-and-so killed me, and then there you go.
All right, good question, Craig. Thanks.
I have to say that I agree with you. And, we have to take the emotion out of it. We have to take away our distaste for the Drew Peterson years and all the bad publicity that he created for himself. You're right. It's a very slippery slope here. Are we going to be convicting people based solely on hearsay? And frankly, this case had basically only hearsay. We didn't have any real circumstantial evidence. We had good motive, of course. Killing your soon-to-be ex-wife is always a good motive. But, it was treated as...
If you're making a list of good motives for down the road.
If you're looking at the soon-to-be ex-wife who did it,
all right.
Husband. But, there was the first autopsy said it was an accident. It was an accident scene. There's no blood. There really wasn't any evidence other than Stacy told me that Drew told her that he killed her. I mean, that's double hearsay, not just single hearsay. So I think Craig is right. I think it's a slippery slope, and I think the law, which says if you killed somebody or you hurt somebody so they wouldn't testify, you don't get the benefit of the hearsay law. It's kind of a punitive law that says, yes, you have these rights, but if you kill somebody so they don't talk, we're not going to give you those rights. And that makes sense, but it also creates really a situation where Drew Peterson could be innocent, and I don't think any of us really think that. But the evidence really wasn't there.
Hasn't it the hearsay thing been upheld once already, though?
Yes, that did go up to the Supreme Court, and it was upheld. Okay. And there's been a law in the federal books that's similar to that, and it's been upheld all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So this is not a new law. Everyone's talking about this being the
new law.
Yeah, it really isn't. And it's been used, and it's just the problem is that there should be additional evidence other than the hearsay to corroborate. And here there just wasn't, and that's what bothers me as an attorney.
Karen Conti is with me. If you want to get a hold of her or have a question during the week for Karen, K. Conti at kcontilaw.com. Karen, can you hang on a minute? I've got a couple more questions, and there's a few people holding who want to talk to you as well. All right, Karen Conti is with me. She is WGN's legal analyst and my partner on Sunday nights. She comes in and answers your legal questions from 8 to 9 when we're on Sunday nights. So let's do this and more with Karen in just a moment on WGN. Brian Noonan on 720 WGN. Mike McConnell will be back on Monday. I am joined by WGN legal analyst Karen Conti, who has some thoughts on this Drew Peterson thing. And listen, I have thoughts, but I'm not an attorney. We've established that many, many times. All right, Karen, so now he's convicted. He's got 38 years sentence. Does he have any issues for appeal?
Well, I think I think he does. I think the issue of the creation of this media circus could still be an issue. Even though Drew Peterson was complicit in it, and
I was going to say,
leader of it.
Yeah, he was orchestrating a lot of it.
But I just don't know that the law blames a defendant for that. I guess the law has to do that, because otherwise every defendant would create the media circus and then use that as a way to get out of jail. But his lawyers went along with it. Judge tried to stop it with protective orders and gag orders, but it just didn't seem to work. I think that's a minor issue. The hearsay issue could probably still be appealed, and I still think that there's an issue of, was there a reasonable doubt as a matter of law? There was no witness, there was no real solid evidence. Was there a reasonable doubt, and did the jury make a mistake in finding that this was murder beyond a reasonable doubt? There are decent issues, but again, you have to consider who the defendant is. It was like John Wayne Gacy. John Gacy had some excellent appellate issues. Who's going to reverse his conviction?
Right.
No one. No one in the world was going to do that just because he was John Gacy. That's where we are with him on appeal. I think he's got issues, but I don't know. I don't think they're going to be heard.
Now, based on the fact that they convicted him this time with pretty much all hearsay evidence, there's no body, but could they try to charge him with Stacy's death?
I've always
or
thought
disappearance?
they were going to do that. Yeah, that's what I thought. I made that prediction on your one of your New Year's Eve.
Right, yes.
Because I thought, they just can't leave this alone. The public has an outcry for it. The Stacy family members want it. They want their day in court. So I've always thought Glasgow's going to do it. And now that he's a convicted murderer, that will come into play in the trial. Not only will the jury pool know it, of course, but they will get to hear it from, during the testimony. So you've got a convicted murderer of a soon-to-be ex-wife on the stand there, and, who wouldn't convict him, even though we don't have a body, even though we don't have a witness, even though we don't have much evidence. It's just the timing of this, the motive of this, the history of this would all lead people to believe that he killed her, and I think that Glasgow might very well bring those charges, and probably sooner rather than later, to kind of keep up with the whole publicity cyclone.
To piggyback onto the conviction.
Right.
Karen Conti is with me, 312-981-7200. A couple questions for Karen real quickly. Joe, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going today?
Good.
We have a big issue. We feel that it's going to get to the Supreme Court again, because didn't our founding fathers create, isn't it our constitutional right that it's called habeas corpus, where you cannot create a law to convict somebody?
Well, again, Karen, right, they didn't create this law. That seems to be a misunderstanding that a lot of people have, and you've talked about this before. They didn't create this law to go after Drew, right?
No, it's kind of complicated, but thanks, Joe. There can be laws that are on the books, and then there can be laws that we call common law, which means that as applied, as the judges apply these laws, they are actually in effect by virtue of case precedent. And these laws have been on the books and have been case precedent for a long time. So it really isn't like this was created for Drew Peterson, although we hear that all the time in the media. It's just not the case.
All right, now I asked you about Glasgow's performance earlier. Now, Joel Brodsky is suing one of the other attorneys for defamation. These guys have made themselves a big story. What do you, as an attorney, what do you make of all this? With the attorneys being front and center, and I know in a high-profile case they always are, but when they start squabbling like this, that can't be good for anybody, let alone the perception of lawyers in general.
I really hate to see this, Brian. I really do, because it really, what we're supposed to, in our code, we cannot have the appearance of impropriety or bring the profession in disrepute is the word. Okay. And I think this conduct really does. And I'm not going to blame one or the other. I know these guys. But I have to tell you, when I see the circus that they helped make out of this and the infighting and the decisions that get made and they're yelling at each other, it just doesn't speak well of our profession. And, even the publicity stuff where they were trying to get money from the book deals, you can't do that with a criminal client. You can't go into business with them to make money off the crime. It's not what our profession's about, and I just don't want anyone to think that it is.
Are there possible sanctions from the judge for these guys, or is that outside the realm of the actual case? So what they do outside of arguing for their client is not under that same umbrella?
Yeah, interesting. I think the judge would have done something already if he was going to do it. But we have a licensing agency through the Illinois Supreme Court called the ARDC, the Attorney Registration Disciplinary Commission, and they are obligated to investigate charges of dishonest conduct or conduct that's inappropriate. And, they could look into this and they could make some findings that there was some wrongdoing here and people can get disbarred for this. So we're talking about serious ramifications, not just putting someone in jail, not just looking bad, but actually losing a law license.
All right, let's get one more question in. Karen Conti's my guest here on WGN. Hello, Michael.
Hi, guys. Karen, you bring up some interesting points, but here's the thing, and they're not going to go after the other one with the other wife because you said it plainly. They don't have a case. But here's the thing. They exhumed this body, and they created a trial, and that's what they had to do. They had to somehow, and they thought about this behind closed doors. They said, we need to create a trial. We need to have a trial because there's no jury on this planet that's going to let this guy go. And that's exactly what they did, which might be a mistake, but everybody knows that this guy's probably guilty. But here's where it kind of falls apart for me. Why is nobody investigating the police and the detectives that have made, according to the prosecuting attorney in the state's attorney's office, blatantly, this is negligence on their part. If this guy's guilty from the evidence that they have, how can you go from a complete, honest accident to murder without investigating the detectives that were involved in this original investigation? And it's never been done. It's never even been talked about, actually.
All right, good question, Michael. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Michael. And I also, let me add to that this. Why did we let Drew Peterson take charge of this, quote, accident scene? Why did we let the soon-to-be ex-husband dominate the scene and secure it without anybody coming in saying, hold on a second, you're related to this woman, you were in a fight with her, you had prior incidences of the police being called 16, 17 times with orders of protection, and you're letting him just stand in this crime scene?
Doesn't make sense.
It's outrageous. It really is. And even the coroner's inquest had people on it who knew Drew Peterson. There were all kinds of stuff going on here that he was either negligent or was protecting their own, or it was some combination. But I agree that there should be some looking into how this was conducted.
Well, I'm sure this is not the last we will hear of the case. I am looking forward to us getting together again a week from Sunday at 8 o'clock when you'll be here answering people's legal questions. Until then, I know people can get a hold of you, kconti at kcontilaw.com. Do you have a number you want them to call as well?
Sure. 312-332-7800.
Well, it is always good talking to you. Please tell Jerry I said hello as well. And I will see you. I'll see you next week.
Okay.
Thanks,
have a
Karen.
Great weekend.
Take care.
Okay.
You too. That's Karen Conti. She's WGN's legal analyst, and you can hear her with me on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock when she comes in to answer your legal questions right here on WGN.